particularly anybody can have a gun. They can have a gun before they can buy alcohol. Guns, especially in our schools. The answer to that is voting so we can Texas. We used to say thank you for Mississippi. We can't even anymore. We got the lowest insured, we got the highest maternal death rate, and the answer to that is to do what? Bet on Beto. And then I've been a woman all my life, and I just resent Uncle Clarence Thomas and those men trying to tell me what to do. So they make it illegal. And the man who's in the Capitol now jumped out within days after they gutted the Voting Rights Act. And we've been fighting it here in Waco and around Texas everywhere. But the answer to all of that on November the 8th is vote and do what? Bet on Beto! Okay, well, while he's coming to the stage, hold up your hand, hold up your signs, and we're going to do what? Woo! Bet on Beto!
Waco, how we doing? All right. I like the energy here. I like being with you. I like Linda Lewis. Everything that she had to say. Luke Warford, our next railroad commissioner. These candidates who are running for office. Mary Duty, we've come a long way from the first time you invited me out to Waco in 2017. And I think, you know, the look on your face when you read my name, you were saying, what is a Beto? And we got to know each other, and you said, going back to 1970, because of the people right here. We listen to them and cancel the STAR test so that they can focus on those kids in the classroom. Every retired teacher gets a cost of living adjustment every year going forward, so they don't have to work themselves through their retirement. We're going to make sure that we prioritize public education right here in Waco and across the state of Texas. We're going to expand Medicaid and bring $10 billion in a year to make sure that we're no longer 51st in the nation in mental health care access. We're leading the country in a number of kids who are dying of diabetes in the year of our Lord 2022, more than 100 years after they invented insulin. That this is happening in Texas today is on your conscience, it's on mine. But it's also on all of us to do all we can with what we have, where we are, to make sure that we overcome this by winning this election. You know, just think about that agenda right there. Respecting women enough to trust them to make their own decisions. Expanding Medicaid so that no one is too poor or unfortunate to be able to see a doctor, take their kid to a therapist, or fill a prescription that will literally save their lives. Ensuring that we get behind our public school educators so they can connect with those kids and stoke a lifelong love of learning, which once we do, they're unstoppable, and so are we as a state. Find me the Republican or the Independent or the Democrat, for that matter, who's going to take the other side of of this argument. These are the big things that bring us together, whatever the differences might exist between us. And yes, there are some things that we may argue over or debate. No two people will agree on everything all of the time. Those of you who are married will know what I'm talking about. But we can find the common ground right now at a time that we're sick and tired of the division, the polarization. A governor who's busy trying to tell us who we're supposed to hate next or be afraid of in our own communities, in our own family, distracting us from the greatness that is ours by right as Texans, the big things that we want to do together. I mean, just think about the person who's in the highest office of power right now in the state of Texas. Chaos, incompetence, cruelty, and corruption. Luke mentioned this in his comments about the grid. The fact that we live in the energy capital of the world. And when the temperature dropped last February, not only could we not keep the lights on, or the heat running, or the water flowing because it froze in our pipes, but we lost the lives of at least 700 of our fellow Texans. 11-year-old boy in Conroe, his mom could not pile enough blankets on his body to keep him alive through the night. 75-year-old Vietnam-era veteran could no longer charge his tank in his home, the oxygen he needed to stay alive, so he takes it out to his truck. He's going to charge it there. They find him dead of hypothermia. Little girl who dies next to her mom in their garage as they try to stay warm next to that car. They got the engine revving. They don't realize they're breathing in carbon monoxide, poisoning themselves to death. Folks who burned up in their homes and apartments, literally burning the furniture inside of them. Luke mentioned 36 degrees in his apartment. Somebody said 34 degrees here. They would have frozen to death otherwise. They took their chances and they died. You know, that didn't have to happen. Wasn't caused by God. It was not the fault of Mother Nature. That guy in the highest position of power who couldn't keep the power on for all of us was warned repeatedly that the grid had underlying vulnerabilities. It was going to require action. It was going to require investment. It was going to require leadership to save the lives of our fellow Texans. He did nothing. And when the temperature dropped and the grid began to fail, he actually ordered people at the Public Utility Commission to peg the price of electricity at its maximum allowable rate, not for minutes, not for hours, but for days. Gas, fuel started trading at 200 times the going rate. Brazos Electricity, your utility right here, though they had a contract, the pipeline company essentially had a gun to their head and said, I know we had a deal, but I'm going to charge you 200 times that. Your utility went into bankruptcy, in the red, billions of dollars. And it's not like the story ends there. They passed that bill onto each one of you. On average, our rates in Texas going up $45 a month to add insult to injury. And you know what? Those 5 days that they couldn't keep the lights on, those pipeline companies, those energy traders made $11 billion in profit. 5 days. The largest transfer of wealth, literally, in Texas history. And not only was it immoral, because it was happening while you were freezing in your homes, but it was illegal. There's literally a state statute that prohibits price gouging during a declared disaster or emergency. So in addition to fixing the grid by weatherizing and winterizing every part of it, and connecting ERCOT, our grid, with the national grid so we can draw down electricity when we need it, sell it back up when we have a surplus, we're going to go after those folks who stole from us and get those $11 billion back and return it to the ratepayer right here in the state of Texas. That's what we can do when we come together. That's how we defeat that corruption, that cruelty, and that incompetence. Now look, I don't think Greg Abbott wakes up saying, how can I make the grid fail today? Or how can I let down those 32,000 kids in the foster care system that I've been warned about time and again are emerging from foster care more damaged than when they went in. That was the ruling of Judge Jack, a federal judge here in Texas, 6 years ago. Well, just this last January, she said, that situation, Governor, that I described to you back then, it's gone from bad to worse. 100 children since the year 2020 have died in the custody and the care of the state of Texas. Hundreds more have been trafficked and sexually abused. We send them to privatized care providers with no accountability, no justice, no resources. We ask these CPS caseworkers who are already overburdened and underpaid to do literally the impossible for these kids who are depending on them. Kids who tonight, think about this when you go back to your homes and we go to our hotel room here in Waco, who will be sleeping in the offices at CPS, in the hallways, underneath the desks, atop the tables. I don't think Greg Abbott wakes up saying, hey, I want to really hurt these kids right now. I want more of them to die on my watch. But for whatever reason, he's unwilling or incapable of doing the right thing to ensure that we can save their lives or fix the grid or prevent 19 kids from being shot in the face by a guy who has an AR-15, a weapon originally designed for use in combat that he legally purchased in the state of Texas at the age of 18. Although he didn't just buy one, he bought two and hundreds of rounds of ammunition. My three kids, special session to make it harder to vote in the state of Texas, and he did. But he dares not call a special session to find the common ground. Listen, we may not each be able to get our ideal or our version of perfect, but we can agree on things like a universal background check or a red flag law or raising the minimum age of purchase from 18 to 21 for an assault weapon. That would save so many lives. That would give our kids, and I'm talking about your kids, our kids, some confidence that we actually care about their lives more than we care about the profits of the gun industry or the NRA or the special interests or the status quo that we have today. They're counting on us, ladies and gentlemen. You know that. They don't get a vote in this election. They don't have a voice but through us and what we are willing to do right now. If you are like me, what's going on in this country, especially what's going on in Texas right now, means that everything that we care about is on the line. Women's bodily autonomy, the ability for you to marry the person of your choice and your dreams, your ability not to be harassed in school because of your difference from anybody else in that classroom, or your ability to survive the school year and go into the next one and have your biggest worry be passing the algebra test and not going up against a guy who's got a weapon that was originally designed for use on a battlefield. Our kids are watching us. They're watching us today, and I guarantee you they're watching us from the future. Imagine the textbooks written decades from today. The people of 2022 who face these existential challenges, the ones I just named, the ones we're all thinking about on this hot afternoon. The climate is changing, and again, not God or Mother Nature, but you and I, our excesses, our emissions, our inaction in the face of the facts, in the one state that is doing more to change the climate and the one state that has more to do to stop this. The ingenuity, the innovation, the technology, the hard work, the willpower right here. When will we unleash it, or will it be too late? And then what Linda just said earlier. In this great democracy, 246 years into this experiment, which you'll have to agree with me, is truly the exception on the planet today. Most people cannot do what we're doing right now around the world. Peacefully come together and non-violently decide the future of our community, our state, and our country. It's not thugs and strongmen. It is the people. Always and perfectly, right? 246 years ago, you had better be a white man with property. And over time, we've expanded the franchise in our democracy to include more and more people. And I kind of thought it was a linear line of progress. And every victory was final. And it was only a matter of time before everyone was included. But I think the rude awakening that I came to, and maybe you did as well, is this fight is never over. No victory is final. In fact, it can be reversed. First, we just heard about the fact that we're sitting here and standing here on the anniversary of the signing of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which creates the first truly multiracial democracy in this country and maybe on the planet. I don't know. Many of you may know world history better than I do. But it was a long time coming. And the road ran right through the state of Texas. And it's important for us to hear this because and still prevailed. In 1923, our predecessors in this state, through their representatives in the legislature, outlawed voting by African Americans in Texas. It was not count how many jelly beans are in the jar, or pay this poll tax, or recite the state constitution, or go through this literacy test, or some other indignity. Literally in state statute, it said if you're black, you're not voting. Now, Dr. Lawrence Nixon, my fellow El Pasoan, who moved there in 1910, started the first chapter of the NAACP in the state of Texas, happened to be in El Paso, voted in every election before 1923. In 1924, goes ahead, gets his poll tax, pays it, gets the receipt. Every voter had to do that back then. Takes the receipt to fire station number 5 on Texas Ave in El Paso, Texas. Goes up, sees the election judges, who he knows by name. They know him as well because he's never missed an election, and says, I'd like to vote. And the election judge says, Dr. Nixon, you know I can't let you vote. And Nixon says, I know you can't, but I've got to try. So he goes to a federal bench in El Paso, takes his case there, fails, the decision is made against him, appeals all the way to the United States Supreme Court, where he wins not once, but 2 signal victories. It takes him 20 years. It's not till 1944 that our elections begin to become integrated again in the state of Texas. Ladies and gentlemen, that history, that persistence, that perseverance, that courage, that tenacity, that strength, that was not lost on Lyndon Baines Johnson when he convened Congress in March of 1965, but a week from Bloody Sunday, when another hero of ours, John Lewis, at the tender age of 24 years old, tries to lead a march across the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama, simply for the right to vote. For him, for everyone who looked like him, for everybody else in this country, and for every generation that followed. And this is what LBJ said, and I'm going to paraphrase here. He said, look, as it was in Concord during that Revolutionary War that established this democracy in the first place. As it was in Appomattox in 1865 that answered the question, will we or will we not be a country of free people? So it is today in 1965 with John Lewis and those other brave souls willing to risk and give their lives for this democracy. That speech, that action by John Lewis, so compelling that a majority white institution willingly ceded power or enlarged that power so that more people could vote and participate in our democracy. Barbara Jordan in 1975 picks up the lead, expands that to include language minorities, Hispanics, Mexican Americans right here in the state of Texas to make sure that they too would be represented in our democracy, which was just referenced earlier. You go back to January 6, 2021. You go back through the slow rolling coup that meets one state legislature after another, including in Texas in 2021, where they are rolling back this right to vote. And this is not a talking point from Democrats. 13% of the ballots cast by mail in this state in March of this year were rejected. Not 13% of the folks stayed at home or couldn't find the polling place or got confused along the way. They actually qualified, requested the ballot, filled it out, mailed it in, and it got rejected. If we saw a 13% rejection in Venezuela or Cuba, we'd say that checks out. Those aren't real democracies. If that happened in Russia, we said, okay, you guys are pretending. We're the real deal. It is happening here. A 95-year-old veteran in Texas. We don't know if he's a Democrat or Republican. It doesn't matter to us. No me importa. He tries 3 separate times to vote by mail, and every single attempt is rejected by the state of Texas. Now you tell me who among us has earned the right to vote more than that guy who was willing to lose his life half a world away in World War II fighting fascism to defend democracy at home. And yet this is the Texas that he lives in today. So as we follow the lead of those who are persevering right here in Waco, let us just remember, there are those who came before us and did as much against greater odds, and that you and I, we're thinking about LBJ's speech in 65, if it was Concord and Appomattox and Selma, now it's Waco in 2022. Never has this democracy been under this kind of attack in our lifetimes, and maybe not since the era of Jim Crow prior to 1965. We alone, because no one is going to ride to our rescue. Not the Department of Justice, although we wish that they would. Not those Democrats in the Senate and the House and the White House, although we wish that they would pass a new Voting Rights Act. Not the Supreme Court. They're racing in the other direction altogether. It's got to be us, the people of Texas. And the way that we do this is reaching out to others right here in the state of Texas. That means knocking on doors on warm days like these, sweating through our shirt, our pants, our chones, our socks, our shoes, making sure that with an open heart, an open mind, and open ears, we're connecting with our fellow Texans where they are. Because this voter suppression that we heard about, this voter intimidation, it is working. 7 million of our fellow Texans who were eligible to vote in 2020, the most consequential election since 1864 for my money, 7 million of our fellow Texans did not cast a ballot. Not for any lack of love for this democracy, not because they're lazy, but when you close down 750 polling locations in the fastest growing state in the union, twice the number of the next closest state, and most of those closures are concentrated in the fastest growing black and brown neighborhoods, when you have a gerrymander of this state that allows those in power to pick their voters instead of the other way around, and chances are, if you're black or you're brown, they'll draw you out of a district to minimize your voting power and the likelihood that you would vote. It's going to take us intervening to stop this cycle. The number one reason given by those 7 million who did not vote in 2020 right here in Texas is that no one knocked on their door and asked them to vote literally. Now, if you're politically engaged and you're aware and you vote, and chances are the fact that you're here means that you are, just think about for a second those who are working 2 or 3 $7.25 an hour minimum wage jobs, who may feel like they just don't have time for this stuff. Or folks who read the headlines about these voter suppression laws and folks being sent to jail for 5 years for voting a provisional ballot because they didn't realize they were still on paper. Let's make sure that we understand and use our empathy and connect with them and bring them in right now, because the other side of this darkness that has descended on Texas is we are the generation that gets the chance to fight for and win everything that matters to every one of us. Are you all with me? Do you want to be in this fight? Do you want to win this election? Do you want to make sure that we save this democracy so we can do the big things that actually matter? Everything that we've talked about so far, I feel like can bring all of us together. If you just say, listen, this guy Beto who's running for governor, he just wants you to be able to vote. Doesn't care who you vote for, doesn't care your party affiliation, doesn't care the difference between you. He just wants to make sure that you can vote. If you're a teacher, that you get paid enough. If you're retired, that you can live through that retirement without working 2 or 3 jobs. If you're a veteran who's willing to lose his life for this country. If you're a veteran who just came back, she served in Iraq and Afghanistan, he wants to make sure that we're fulfilling our end of the bargain to you. Commander Sherman just had us out in Killeen not too long ago. We talked about standing up a toxic burn pit registry right here in the state of Texas. Who cares what the federal government can or cannot do in Texas? We're going to get it done. We're going to listen to veterans who are sick and tired of being prescribed opioids at the VA and legalize marijuana in the state of Texas, so that if you find something else that's going to save your life and realize that it relieves your symptoms, we're not going to send you to jail for doing that. And if we acknowledge the fact that most of those who serve time for possession of a substance that's legal in most of the rest of the country are black and brown, we're also going to expunge the arrest records for those who have served time for marijuana in the state of Texas. We can do this. If Greg Abbott's Texas is it's you or me, our Texas is going to be it's you and me. It's all of us coming together at this incredibly decisive, defining moment of truth. So Waco, I'm so grateful to be with you right now. I'm asking you to think about what you are willing to do to make sure that we can bring this victory home. There are a number of volunteers who are wearing yellow vests with us today. They will sign you up for a block walk. That means knocking on these doors, talking to these voters, bringing them in right now. Remember, we only lost in 18 by 2.6%. 216,000 votes. There's 7 million out there that we have yet to hear from, whose votes have yet to be counted. They're waiting on you to show up. So please, please sign up before you leave. And as we turn to the question and answer part of this program, where we want to hear from anyone here in Waco who wants to ask a question, share an idea, talk to us about your expectations for the next 4 years. Let me just say, it is an extraordinary honor to be able to run this race on your behalf. An even greater honor to be able to win this and actually serve you, to get this state moving in the right direction, and to make sure that we are living up to our full promise and our full potential, every single one of us, regardless of the differences between us. You all with me on this? Let's do this. Let's go win this race. Let's do it together. And now let's listen to one another. Let's hear what's on your mind. Miss Cynthia Cano's got a microphone.
Right behind you.
Here we go.
All right, if you raise your hand, I will make my way around the room. I'm going to go right over here first.
The sun.
Yeah, it's coming right in.
You gonna borrow this?
Oh, no, no.
Are you going to
My hands are.
encourage people to rush the state capitol in Austin and change the vote? I pray that you don't, and I'm going to vote for you.
Thank you. You know, when I mentioned losing in 2018 by 2.6%, 216,000 votes. On election night in 2018, that November, worked with many of you, certainly worked with Mary and the team here. We were heartbroken. We really thought we were going to win this thing. I felt it in my bones along the way. The momentum, the trajectory, the turnout that we were seeing, every sign showed us that we were going to win. It was going to be close. But on election night, when it became evident that we were not going to win, and obvious that Ted Cruz was, I picked up my phone. I called his telephone. He answered, and I congratulated him on his victory. I said, "You won a hard-fought campaign. You will be my senator, our senator, for the next 6 years. There are many things we disagree on, but if there's some way that we can work together," I was a member of Congress at the time, "I'm here for it, and I hope that we can." I didn't hear back from him, by the way, but that's what we do. Those of us who believe in democracy, and there have been Republicans who've made those phone calls and Democrats who've made those phone calls over the year. For Ted Cruz, our U.S. Senator, to stand on the floor of that chamber and argue for insurrection, argue to overturn the lawful, legitimate, fair vote in that election, so that the loser becomes the winner. That's not who we are here in the state of Texas. And as we look for openings with folks who may not have always considered themselves Democrats, who may be independents, who may be Republicans, let's remind them that we believe and we will fight for this democracy in the rule of law and respecting the will of the voters. But I am confident that with your help, we're going to win this election. Thank you for being here. Appreciate it.
And we're straight back, singing.
First, I want to say this is the first time I've ever been to any of your, events, and so thank you so much. I'm really enjoying this. I am a public school teacher here in the Waco area.
All right.
At a Title I school. My main question is I want to know how specifically you're going to help the teacher system as far as the teacher pay and the retirement. What is your specific plans for doing that?
So in this county, and you can verify this, the teacher, the counselor, the librarian, on average, is underpaid by about $11,000 against the national average. So not $11,000 less than the highest paid teacher in America, just the average paid teacher in America chances are you're $11,000 under. Half of all teachers in Texas work a second or a third job to make ends meet. Not for extra spending cash, not for fun or for kicks, but to pay the note on the mortgage, to put food on the table. I mentioned that retired teachers haven't seen a cost of living adjustment since 2004. It's been 18 years so far. So the good question is, where are we going to come up with all this money? We're the 9th largest economy on the planet. It's a $2 trillion GDP, $250 billion biannual budget. We have the resources right now. Just got to make sure that we're putting them in the right place. We could choose, for example, to have real solutions on the U.S.-Mexico border that address issues like immigration, like maybe a Texas-based guest worker program, or fully legalizing every dreamer so that they have citizenship in this country, or making sure that if you want to join family, there's a safe, legal, orderly path to do that. If you're trying to claim asylum, you don't wait 6 years for adjudication. Maybe it is 6 weeks instead. We get all of that off the table. We can focus on those who intend to do us harm, those who may want to traffic in fentanyl or traffic in human beings for that matter. How is this connected to teaching? We're spending $6 billion on these stunts at the border that are doing nothing to solve the problems that we really have. We can come up with solutions and we can direct resources back into the classrooms. But there's more out there. Right now, we have a very unfair system of funding public education. We ask you, the local property taxpayer and renter who pays property taxes through your increasing rents, to shoulder the majority of the burden to fund public schools. So those trustees here in Waco and McLennan County, when they think about paying you that $11,000 more, they say, if I have to pay you more, I'm gonna have to tax everybody else in this community. The state of Texas used to pay half of the cost of public education. Now it's paying 40% of the cost. We start paying half again. We take off pressure from local communities, reduce property taxes, and there's more money to go straight to you. And then in addition, y además, right now, us property tax payers are also paying the lion's share of property taxes in the state, and corporations are able to shirk their responsibility. They hire the lawyers and the lobbyists to contest their appraised value in just one county, Tarrant County. Average appraised value for a homeowner went up 50%. Average appraised value for a Walmart, one of the most profitable corporations on planet Earth, went down 6%. When corporations are paying property taxes at the same rate that homeowners and renters are, that's another $4 to $6 billion annually. Again, we can reduce property tax pressure and invest more into public schools. And lastly, I mentioned marijuana earlier. We spend $500 million locking people up for possession that's legal almost everywhere else right now. And we lose out on another $500 million that we could bring in if we tax the regulated, controlled sale of this substance. So my math's a little bit shaky, but we're close to $10 billion just there. Expand Medicaid, another $10 billion coming into the state a year. We've got the resources to get this done, to have your back, and to pay you a salary that's one of dignity and respect. Thanks for being here. There you are.
Hi, good evening. Thank you so much for being here. I'm also a teacher, and so I don't mean to dominate the conversation. I also work in a Title I school that was formerly part of Aging More. So we have a long history of serving the underserved in our community. And I hear everything you're saying about all the different things we could address. And I do believe you are our next governor of Texas, and I will speak that into the universe. And so my question for you, Governor O'Rourke, is your first 100 days in office, I just need to know, are you going to prioritize our kids? Because I saw what you did for the families in Uvalde and how you went and stood up to them, to the governor, to his face. This summer, my husband and I went on a trip to San Antonio for our anniversary, and we went and visited all of their memorials. And when I go to work every day, I have to wonder if that's my last day. If I'm gonna have to watch something happen to one of my students. We've had multiple guns confiscated in our school in the last year. I just need to know if that's going to be your number one priority. I know there's so many other things, but schools encompass everything. It's homelessness, it's lack of food, it's lack of health care, it's mental health, it's everything that I think all of us here are passionate about, but it's like you said, the kids who don't have the power to speak out, they can't vote. And I just need to know that that's what you're going to prioritize.
Thank you for being here, and thanks for being one of these extraordinary educators that we're literally counting on right now. And you're sticking with it at perhaps the toughest time to do this. We were listening to another amazing educator in Laredo, Texas, who was telling me why she opposed STAR tests. And this is going to get to your question. And she said it's not just that it doesn't effectively measure the potential of that child or the effort I'm expending to connect with her right now. But she said we've just been through 2 years of a pandemic, 2 years of learning loss, 2 years where a lot of these kids lost a grandparent or two to COVID. Their folks may have lost their job. Their family may have lost their home. She said literally, I'm just trying to keep them alive right now. The level of suicidal ideation that we're seeing in our schools, in our middle schools today. She told me about a 14-year-old who took her own life. She said, Beto, you gotta be with me here on this one. I'm just trying to keep them alive, and I need your support because she said my colleagues are leaving the classroom. She said I don't blame them because sometimes I want to leave because I think, what can I do? What I'm trying to perform and do for them is insufficient to the pain and suffering they're going through. But she said if I leave, who's going to be there for them at the end of the day? So it's all the things we've talked about, making sure that you're paid enough to just be able to focus on them, fighting this effort on Abbott's part to turn your public tax dollars into vouchers and send them to private schools in some other part of the state, but also making sure that the only thing you and those kids have to really worry about is the lesson that you're trying to get across to them on that day. Imagine if we had called a special session sometime in those last 10 weeks and to just put on the table everything after listening to you. You want to harden your schools and talk about locked doors and making sure there are fewer points of access and higher fences and walls? Let's talk about that. Maybe that's going to help in certain situations. Let's back those teachers and parents and kids and administrators who know their campuses and communities better than we ever will. Mental health, something the governor said the day after the Uvalde shooting. He said, this is a mental health problem. Interesting because we're 51st in mental health care, and the month before Uvalde, he took $211 million out of the mental health care budget of the state of Texas. But also on that agenda, we must have something that allows us to address the fact that we have 5 of the worst mass shootings in U.S. history in the last 5 years right here in this state. And we either accept that we are inherently violent and evil and murderous, and I'm not about to do that, or that there's something that we can do to make this better. Still defending our Second Amendment right to own and possess these firearms while doing a far better job of protecting her life and the lives of those kids in that classroom. That shooter in Uvalde patiently waited till his 18th birthday because the law today says you got to be 18 to buy that AR-15. So when we say let's raise the minimum age of purchase to 21, there will be some who come back at us and they say, but Beto, criminals won't follow the law. And that may be true in some circumstances, but this kid did. 21 would have purchased us 3 more years for some kind of intervention in his life, right? Or a red flag law. This guy was sending signals off in so many directions that his friends called him the school shooter before he ever walked into that school and shot anybody. But we don't have a red flag law in the books. If we do in that special session that we'll convene, then we can say, look, if you have a firearm in the house and you're threatened to shoot up your school or shoot yourself or shoot your girlfriend, we're going to intervene through due process before it is too late. These are common sense things. And I've listened to gun owners, and I feel like every gun owner in the state of Texas at this point, non-gun owners, Republicans, Democrats, rural communities, big cities alike, almost everyone can get behind this agenda. Would it stop every instance of gun violence in Texas? No, it won't. But don't let that concession be the end of the conversation. That's what they want, right? Acknowledge the fact that we could have stopped Uvalde, we could have stopped El Paso, we could have stopped Midland, Odessa. We could give you another reason to stay in that classroom, knowing that we've got your back. To meet teachers who say, you know what, I'm a chemistry teacher. This one woman told me in San Antonio. And she said, I feel kind of guilty because in my school I've got these big lab tables and we can hide behind them. I don't think the bullets can get through, but I worry about the English teacher, the social studies teacher, the history teacher down the hallway. Another teacher who has a 14-year-old daughter said her kiddo asked her, Mom, when that gunman comes into your classroom, are you going to sacrifice your life for those kids? Or are you going to try to get out so that you can be there for us? And last one I'll tell you, because some folks say this is a Democrat-Republican issue. We were in that liberal bastion of Lubbock, Texas, just a few weeks ago. And a very conservative Republican stepped up, said, my 9-year-old's about to start the school year. And I know that he's been through these active shooter drills. He's supposed to hide under the desk, go into the closet, be real quiet, make sure that he doesn't make a noise when that gunman tries to get in. I told him, the hell with that, this father told me. And they've got one of these old school buildings where you got to crank the windows open. And he had his kid find out which cranks were painted shut, that don't open, and which are still working. He knows the ones that work. That's the one he's going to crank open when that shooter comes in so he can duck out that window. Parents are making active shooter plans with their kids. Husbands are making end-of-life decisions with their spouses who are going back into that classroom. This is crazy. This is our current situation, but it doesn't have to be our future. It doesn't have to be our fortune. It doesn't have to be our fate. So yes, we have to win this election, and yes, it's my #1 priority. You and I have to work together until we change this so you're not worried about it anymore. Thanks for being here. Very grateful to you. Yes.
Hi, my name is Jeanette Bell. I'm president of the Northeast Riverside Neighborhood Association, Precinct 14, East Waco. My issue is, my concern is, we're a food desert. My neighborhood association organized to eliminate hunger, poverty, and disease, okay? Our mission is to preserve the quality of life. The closest grocery store is like 2 miles outside of Interstate 35, okay? Food security is a basic human right. And I'm tired of people telling us it will take time. You building this concrete junk around us. But we don't even have access to healthy, nutritional food. People are going to gas stations to use their food stamps. Yeah. Convenience stores to use their food stamps. A 79-cent loaf of bread is going to cost them $2.79. Yeah. Okay? Kids eat potato chips, drinking soda, ice cream, cookies, all the unhealthy, zero-calorie foods, you know? And that bothers me, you know? So what would you do about food insecurity in food deserts?
Thank you for being here. First thing I just want to say is thank you for elevating this, because it almost never gets brought up at these town hall meetings we have. We have them all over the state, and yet we see the consequences of this all over the state. We were just in Falls County, and we were having a town hall there, and I read before I went in that half of the folks in that rural county live below the poverty line. And as we were leaving town to come to Waco right now, we saw cars lined up all the way through the parking lot and down the side of the highway access road to go to the food bank. In El Paso, Texas, at the beginning of the pandemic, we had folks in lines 2 miles deep trying to get a box of food to feed their families. Some of them had lost their jobs in the pandemic. Others were showing up in their McDonald's uniform. Others were showing up in their scrubs from the hospital that they work in. These are working Texans who don't make enough to be able to feed themselves. And for me, the kicker is when I went back and visited this food bank just this year, they said, hey, Beto, back at the start of 2020, as bad as those lines were at the start of the pandemic, it is worse now today. Your property taxes have gone up. Your electricity bills have gone up. When Greg Abbott shuts down the U.S.-Mexico border, where we import 2/3 of our produce, and those prices go up, everything you pay for at the grocery store has gone up. Gasoline has gone up. I don't need to tell you all, we're all experiencing this together. I mentioned Medicaid expansion earlier, standing up these closed hospitals, these clinics, making sure we have more doctors and mental health care providers. But food is also medicine. Being able to get healthy calories into your system that you can burn while you're doing that 6th grade homework at night, instead of potato chips or a honey bun or a donut or a Snickers bar, which is all you might be able to get if you don't have an automobile and you're walking distance to that convenience store, that gas station, where that's all you're going to be able to afford. Why don't we follow your lead and the lead of others who understand their communities best, and find out how we invest these resources to make sure that healthcare does not just cover your medication or the doctor's visit or being with a therapist. As important as that is, and we're going to do that, but it also includes the environment in which you live, the food that you can take in, whether it's safe to walk on the streets or ride a bicycle, or this concrete and asphalt that you talked about has kept you penned in. The rates in Texas of heart disease, of obesity, of diabetes, of things that are totally preventable and do not have to be our future, are solvable by listening to the people who have these solutions in their community. So I'm looking forward to partnering with you. I want to make sure that before we leave, Cynthia and I get your contact information and you get ours. Thank you for raising this. Very grateful to you. Great question.
Right here to your left. To your left.
There we go.
Okay, we're going to have 2 more questions. This young lady and Commander Sherman.
Hi, I'm 18, so this will be my first election. And
First time voter!
But ever since June 24th, I've been really worried about my ability to be able to have what I need. Anything that I need, and have the rights to do whatever I feel that I need for my own body. I'm about to start college for the first time, and I shouldn't have to worry about what the rest of my future is going to look like. Just basically this next semester should be my biggest worry. So I'm wondering what your plan of action is to be able to make it where I'm not worried about whether or not my rights will be taken away.
Thanks for being here. And if you do not mind, I want to just expand your question to other rights that are under attack, because I think some of us, and maybe even myself, didn't take seriously enough the threat that Greg Abbott and others made against you and other women in the state when they said, we're going to ban abortion completely, no exception for rape or incest. Some of us were like, yeah, right, that's never going to happen. Roe versus Wade, it was decided half a century ago. That's not going anywhere. You know, adopt all the resolutions, the party platforms, pass these meaningless trigger laws, and they did. And it turned out that we are living in a state that has a total ban beginning at conception for with no exception for rape or incest. And you all saw this at the press conference when he's signing the bill, and the reporter asks, Mr. Governor, you realize that there's no exception for rape, right? And he says, don't worry about it, we're going to eliminate rape in the state of Texas. More rapes have been committed in the state of Texas than any other state. There are thousands of untested rape kits right now on the shelves at DPS headquarters in Austin, Texas, and fewer rapists by half are being brought to justice under Greg Abbott's Texas right now. But that failure to imagine where we are right now could also be our future if we fail to take seriously this attack on contraception, on marriage equality, and their promise to revive the sodomy laws in Texas that would prevent same-sex intimacy. It almost sounds crazy leaving my lips to hear this, but that's exactly what they want to do. And in fact, they will do that unless we win this election. So, I like your attitude. I like your attitude. So listen, it is tough right now, and I hear it in your voice. And I hear it from so many others that I've met. When they're proposing checking your travel documents if you're of childbearing age before you leave the state of Texas, when they're promising to go after employers who fund the out-of-state travel for the women who work for them who want to go make their own personal, private, sometimes very painful health care decisions, I can only imagine, but I'm going to try to and use my power of empathy, what that would be like for me, and then do something about it. But I mentioned earlier on democracy, we've been up against longer odds and overcome them. We just met a woman in the last town hall that we were in Marlin, just a few hours ago, who mentioned in 1971 having this very complicated pregnancy. If it were to continue, might very well cost her life. Abortion was outlawed, illegal in the state of Texas, and luckily she was able to go to somebody who could help her out. But she felt very fortunate in being able to do so, and it was a reminder of all the women who did not. Because whether it's legal or illegal, abortions will still take place in the state of Texas. If they're illegal, they'll just be that much more dangerous and deadly. And it made me think of the fact that on the eve of 1973's Roe versus Wade decision, it was outlawed in Texas just the way it was today. But no one came in and saved the day for us. Jane Roe, a fellow Texan, Sarah Weddington, Linda Coffey, they argued that case before an all-male Supreme Court and won the right to privacy to make these very personal decisions that stood the test of time for half a century. So my feeling is, if it was Texas women in 1973 who won that right, it is going to be Texas women like you who win that right back with this election in 2022. And every other right that's under attack right now. So we're in this with you. We've got each other's back. Let's just remember that the fight is not over on the night of November 8th. This other side's not going to stop fighting until they draw their last breath. We can't either. Okay, this is forever. Thank you.
Okay, to your right, if we did not get to your question, we're going to stay after to take pictures, say a quick hello. We're going to be up against that brown fence. That will be where the line is. And then where the flag is where we're going to take the pictures and say hi.
Amanda Sherman.
How you doing? It's good to see you again. I had the pleasure of introducing you when you came to our VFW post in Killeen in May. The energy we had there was fantastic. These guys have blown it out of the water today. I appreciate everybody coming out, but I actually have some thank yous. Okay, the first thank you. I live in a red county. Most of the time, every time they have a Ford, I go to the Ford, and I'm the only fly in the middle. All right, so that is what it is. And always raise my hand for a question, and I'm always overlooked. Maybe it's because I'm so handsome. But, so this is the second time. I want to thank you that this is the fifth, sixth time I've heard you speak. Every time I hear you speak, you're telling me what's on your mind. You're not telling me this side is demonic, this side is all this other negative stuff. You're saying, listen, these are the decisions they made, and this is why I think they made it. Here's how I'm going to take care of your situation. I want to thank you for doing that. I want to thank you for going down to Uvalde, because the week after you came to our post is when that incident happened. And there was a young man in the audience who asked you your feelings about an AR-15. Now, I've fired more M16s than I can remember, some in defense, some in training. So I know firsthand what it does. The only difference between the M16 and AR-15 is AR doesn't have automatic fire. So what you told the man was on point, and we still talking about that in Killeen today. So I appreciate you being honest in what you're doing, standing up for us. You got me excited. I'm more excited for that young lady over there that gets to vote for the first time. So I really appreciate what you're doing. Good luck. And just as I introduced you in May, I'm going to say once again, congratulations to our next elected mayor.
Thank you, Commander Sherman. Folks, this is totally within our power. A little more than 90 days to go. I mean, anybody can do anything for 90 days, right? We're on day 19 of a 49-day push throughout Texas. 49 days straight on the road. We've been in Muleshoe, we've been in Pecos, we've been in Amarillo, we've been in Lubbock, we've been in Quanah, we've been in Spearman, we've been in Bowie, we've been in Longview, Texarkana, Beaumont, and Port Arthur, and 20 more cities that I've forgotten since then, right? I remember them all, and I remember being there, and I'm so grateful for this. I'm just telling you, we on this campaign are going to work our hearts out for you over the next 3 months, all the way through the night of November 8th. We're doing this because we know that you are going to work your hearts out as well. We know that you're doing this not for the candidate, not for his political party. As Commander Sherman was saying, this is about all of us right now, and it will take all of us to win and overcome it. So, on behalf of how good we are going to feel on the night of November 8th, thank you, Waco, for everything you're doing, everything you will do, and for being with us today.